Welcome to Lesson 7 in the C# from Start to Finish course. My name is Tim Corey, and today we're going to be building our forms. Just like with a class library, when we build our forms, we're just going to take the design we already came up with in the planning process and put it into an actual form. You might be tempted to write a bit of code in this step as well, but really we want to concentrate on just building our forms. We'll start wiring them up later. Now, if you remember, the designs we came up with were just rough sketches. In this step, we'll make those forms look good. That means establishing a design guide of some type. I won't bore you with the experimentation I went through to finally come up with my design, but instead I'll just walk you through the end results as we go. Before we get started though, I do want to point out that I am basing all of my work in this video off the designs we did in planning step number 4. If you have the companion workbook, you can refer back to those designs to help you follow along. Otherwise, you can look back at Lesson 4's videos to see what our design plans were. So let's get started. Before we get started in the lesson, I want to remind you to subscribe to this channel. If you are subscribed, click the little bell icon and make sure you're getting the alerts when I add a new video. And while you check on that, could you also give this video a like? I know that we're just getting started, but liking a video is a simple way that you can make this course more popular, and that helps everyone. It increases the visibility of my videos on YouTube, which generates more income for me. It helps others out because they get introduced to this valuable content, and it helps you out because I'm able to produce more free videos. Okay, so let's get back to the lesson. Here we have our Visual Studio project as we left it when we built our class library. The only differences are that I did add those code comments on each one of the classes. But that's not really why we're here. Instead, we want to add a new project to the solution. So right click on the solution, say add new project, and we're going to select Windows Form Application. I'm going to call this project Tracker UI. This is a Windows Form application. So Windows Form, Tracker UI, hit OK. Now the first thing it does, it gives us this form1.cs. Now when we create our class library, I said delete that class1.cs and start over, start fresh. We can't really do the same thing inside of the Windows Form. And the reason why is because in this program.cs, you'll see that we run right here, form1. So we have to have something here to run in order for it to be a form project. Now we could delete it and then come back here and manually update this, but I find that for forms, it's probably better just to rename it as is right over here. So I clicked and then I clicked again after a second, or you can right click and say rename. We're going to call this the tournament viewer form. And it's going to ask us, since we're renaming this file, would you also like to rename all the references to form1? We want to say yes. So now it renames the class, the partial class tournament viewer form, and also this partial class here, tournament viewer form. And that's what you want. So now the question is, what next? Well, we're going to start right away by modifying some of these properties. Let's actually pull the properties window out, like so. And I call this form, I call it tournament viewer form. By the top right here, where it says text, it still says form1. I'm going to change this to say tournament viewer. And that just tells us, it changes the text up here to say something besides form1. We can change that later if we feel like that's just not a great descriptive name. The next thing I'm going to do is change this back color. This back color is a battleship gray and it's really ugly, especially since most forms use this if they're built inside of Visual Studio. So let's change the back color. Instead of control, we're going to select under web, we'll select white. And that just gives it a little more modern feel. White is a great background color because it doesn't draw the eye away from our stuff on the form. So usually I start with either a white form, or if I'm going to go the opposite, kind of like this Visual Studio window is, I'd go a dark gray. But let's choose white for this. The next thing I'm going to do is change my font. Now it's important to change your font right away on a form instead of later, because every control we add to this form after we change the font will inherit that new font. But any controls that were already on here won't get that new updated font. So if you change it up front, then all the new controls will have it. So let's change this font from the standard, which is Microsoft Sans Serif, to this one. Let's make a 16-point font. That's a nice thin font. It looks a little more modern. And of course that changes the size of our form because of the size of the font. It assumes the form will be a little bigger. We'll shrink that down just a bit. And the only other thing I want to do is I want to change this icon. So let's go to our demos folder, Tournament Tracker UI, and here's this Tournament Tracker icon file. Now, in case you didn't see me create that, which you didn't, or know how I create it, I actually just used the Metro Studio from Syncfusion. It's a free tool that allows me to take simple icons and make them into icon files or PNG files or JPEG files. It's a really handy little tool, and I find it's useful for creating these icon files. I am really not a designer, and so I don't have the tools or the experience and skill to create my own icons from scratch. So it's a great starting point. So I created this little clipboard icon. My thought was that's what I always saw my coach carrying whenever we had a tournament, where he'd keep track of things. And so I figured that'd be kind of a good representation of what this project will do. And so we'll add that icon to every form we create, just to kind of keep a cohesive look. So that's the basics of this form, but don't forget this is actually the tournament viewer form. It has more than just the base stuff. We have to actually add stuff here. So let's start dragging stuff on. So I'll open up my toolbox and pin it. And the first thing is at the top we have here is kind of this header label. And so I'm going to change this for color. Instead of control text, I'm actually going to give a custom color. I'm going to say 51, 153, 255, and that's the RGB code. Well, it has to be 255, not 555. There we go. So now it's that bluish color. And I'm going to change the font on this. Since it is a header label, I'm going to change the font to light 28. So let's go to the font here. And we'll change this to light and 28. Now we'll also change the name of the label. We'll call this the header label. And for the text, we'll say tournament and a colon. All right, that gets us started. And we can rearrange that how you want. I'll get it roughly in place. I may tweak it later, but that's good for now. Now I'm actually going to copy this and paste it. And I hit a Control C. Once it's selected, I hit Control C. And then I hit Control V and it puts a pasted copy here. And that's fine for objects. Just as a quick note, don't do that for forms. That's just a real headache. I actually did that the other day. I was in a hurry and I'm like, oh, I already have all these base settings I want for my other form. I'll just copy and paste the form. It'll be okay. It was a nightmare. You step on toes back and forth between the two forms. They actually kind of get commingled and it's just ugly. So my quick piece of advice here is don't copy and paste forms. It's physically possible. You can copy here and then just right click on your project and say paste. So it's physically possible, just don't do it. All right, enough of that. You can copy and paste objects like this. So it'll give it a new name, label 1. So let's change that. And this is the actual tournament name. And for now, we're going to just put none. That'd be a good starter name for it. And then we'll move that over a little bit more. All right. Next, we have a drop down with a label. So let's start a label. And I will call this round. And I'll call this the round label. And I will change the for color again to the 51, 153, 255. I'm going to change the font itself to 20 point. Now I'll line that up. And that should be good for our round label. Now let's get the drop down itself, the combo box. Normally you'd align these with the pink line here. That pink line indicates that the bottom of the label text will be the bottom of the text in the drop down. But because I made the label a little bit bigger of a font, I'm actually going to move this up and use the bottom guide here. So that blue line. And what that indicates is the bottom of the labels box, which is invisible, but the bottom of the box, will be the same as the bottom of the combo box. And that kind of moves the combo box text up just a little bit and makes it a little more centered. Then I will drag this out a little bit, make it a little bigger. Let's call it there for now. I will call this round dropdown. Next, I have to add a checkbox. I'll line that up. And again, I'm going to change the for color to, you guessed it, 51, 153, 255. I'm also going to change the font on this to be 20 point, because the font actually applies to the equivalent of this label here. I'm also going to change the flat style to be flat. And that will make that checkbox actually turn blue instead of having a black check in it. And the last thing I'm going to do is come down here and change this to unplayed only. And I should also name this. To unplayed only checkbox. Now one thing to note here is I've called this round label, I've called this round dropdown, and I've called this unplayed only checkbox. You don't really have to put the type in there in that name. I like to. One of the reasons why is because this label here really is the same kind of thing as this. They both are for the same thing. This indicates it's the round, but it's the round. It's the label for round versus this is the drop down for round. And so putting the type in the end allows me to differentiate, but also when I am searching in IntelliSense, I can actually search for label. And even though it's not the beginning of the word, it will give me all the labels. And that makes my life a little easier if I forget what did I call it. Usually I don't mess with the labels, but I would mess with checkboxes or drop downs or whatever. So let's move that up a little bit. Something like that. So now we have a list box. Be careful to get a list view. It's a little bit different. I've made that mistake more than once, but I want a list box. And one of the reasons why I want a list box is because it behaves very, very similarly to the combo box. These two are basically the same thing with just a UI difference, which makes life a whole lot easier for me because I can treat the two of them in a very similar manner and not get confused on which is which. So there's our list box. I'm going to change the border style to fixed single. And then the only thing left to do is to actually name it. In this case, it's the matchup listbox. So that's half the form. The other half of the form is I have to have a label over here. Let's grab this one right here, copy, paste. Normally I'm not a big fan of copy paste when it comes to coding, but in this case it seems to work pretty well because it brings a lot of those same things along with it, the for color and the font and the flat style and everything else. So I tend to use it for that, but you still need to be careful to name this something different. All right, so this will be team1 name. And again, typically I wouldn't have this say team1 or team2 because I want to have some kind of flexible system where you can have more than 2 teams, whatever. But we've already talked about the fact that we're only ever going to have 2 teams competing in a tournament. And so it just makes more sense to have things labeled team 1 and team 2. Let's go ahead and do that. And we'll call this team 1. Just so we have something to visualize right here. And then I will copy this and paste it down below. And I will say here, this is score. And team 1 score label. And then I'm going to grab a text box. And again, I will line that up at the bottom. And I will call this team 1 score text or score value. Let's call it score value. And I will copy all of this and I'll paste it. And since I copied all 3, notice how I highlighted that. I'll do it again for you. I clicked and dragged on a form. And notice that little gray outline of a box. This is my highlight window. It's now highlighted 3 items, this label, and this text box. Now I can Control C on that and Control V to paste, and we'll paste all 3 of those items together in the same layout and relationship. Then, if I select all of those, and I drag one of the items, say it's label, I can line it up with the other label that is its companion, in this case, this one right here, and now these 2 are in perfect alignment. Now I just need to go through and change all of these. Let's see, I called this one team 1 name, so I'll call this one team 2 name. And I called this one team 1 score label, so I'll call this one team 2 score label. And this one is team 2 score text. Just a quick note here, because I was selecting items that had the same property, so this label and this text both have that name in parens property. And actually all items do because that's the name of the object instance. So because they both have these, when I switch between them, it keeps the box kind of highlighted. If you can see there, it's a little bit darker color and it's solid. And what that indicates is the box is really selected. And so if you start typing, and notice I'll select up here where it says team 2 name. Now I'm not going to click there. I've just clicked off and clicked in. I haven't clicked there. But if I start typing, notice how it turns blue and my typing goes in that box. That's a quick way to move from item to item, renaming things or setting a text property or other common property between objects. Just select the object and start typing. Let's come down here. We're actually going to change this to say team 2. Now, the last thing we need to do, well, second to last thing we need to do, copy and paste this, just so I have a label. And I'm going to change this to say VS for versus. And yeah, I might put a dash in before and a dash after. And I'll kind of center it-ish. Make it look pretty good. And I will call this the versus label. Now note, I could use some of these tools up here. There's some tools up here that allow me to align things better. So you can use those to align them the same height or the same relationship with the page. But I'm not going to use that for this little thing right here. It'd probably be a little more complicated than I need to worry about. And the last thing on this page we need to do is add that score button. So come up here. Notice I'm in Common Controls. This is where I really live. Common Controls has pretty much everything you need for 95% of all forms at least. But if you really feel like you have to go beyond that, you could browse around in these other categories or go to all Windows forms and really browse around. Or if you think you know a name of something, you can type it. So for example, I'm looking for a button. Now obviously the button's right here. But if I were to start typing BUTT, it shows me that in all Windows forms, there's a button and a radio button. In Common Controls, there's a button and a radio button. The duplication here is because all Windows forms has all the controls, whereas Common Controls is a smaller subset of that has the most common ones. Kind of makes sense. So there's not two different buttons here. They're the same button. It's just where it comes from. In this case, let's grab the Common Controls button. I'll make this a bit bigger. I'm going to align it more like that for now. But before I go on, I'm going to change this to say this is the score button. And now let's change the flat style to flat. Let's change the flat appearance. We're going to change the border color to silver. We're going to change the border size. We'll leave the border size alone. We'll change the mouse down back color and the mouse over back color. So mouse down back color will be 102, 102, 102. And the mouse over back color will be 242, 242, 242. We can try that out in a minute. And then the font, we're actually going to change it to say semi-bold. We'll leave it at 16. And the font color we need to change as well. Again, that's the 51153 255. Looks a little better. And now we'll change that to say score. There we go. So there's our score button. And that's pretty much it for our tournament viewer form. So we have our tournament and the name of the tournament. We have the round dropdown with which round we want to view. We can check a box that says only show us the unplayed games in this round. Then we have this matchup list that shows up all the matchups in that round. And then if you select one of them, it's going to highlight and say team 1 is this team's name right here. And their score is this, if they have any score loaded yet. And then again, team 2 and their score, if any. We can also fill in these boxes to give the score and then hit the score button. And that will complete that round for that matchup. And it will say, okay, who won based upon the score. So that's our whole page. Now let's see this in action. But in order to do that, we open up Solution Explorer. And right now the tracker library is bold. That means that it is the project that will be started when we hit this start button. The problem with that is you can't load or run a class library. it isn't an independent project that can be run on its own. So this Tracker UI is the one we want to run. So we're going to right click on Tracker UI and say Set as Startup Project. Now we hit Start. And here is the form. Notice it's a little bit different than even the designer looks like. And the reason for that is because this is actually taking the settings from my Windows and applying it to this bar up here and these icons. So these are actually Windows 10 style icons and bar. So that looks pretty good. Also notice the mouse over changes the color of the button a little bit. And if I click on it, it changes to even darker. So that gives us a really clear indication that button was clicked. So that's form 1. Let's move on to form number 2. This should go a bit quicker as we continue to move and as we go over things you've already covered, so I won't have to explain them. So we're going to add a new form. We're going to call it the Create Tournament form. And again, go into the properties. Let's go ahead and pin this. And the text of the form we're going to change to say Create Tournament. The font we're going to change. And then the back color we're going to change as well. We'll change it to white. And that just mirrors what we already have over here. Oh, one more thing, and that's the icon. We'll use that same icon. Now we can do a little bit of shortcut in the fact that if we come back to our Solution Explorer and open up our other form, which is actually open up here, we can come back over here and start copying and pasting. We can actually notice it's already labeled header label. So we can just say Create Tournament. And now that is the right size for label, and it looks just like the label over here. Now we need the tournament name label and text box. So let's grab these two right here. I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to say tournament name. Tournament name label. And tournament name value. And this is where the user will enter in the tournament name. Let's make it about like so. Next we have the entry fee. Let's align those two there. We'll call this entry fee label and entry fee text or value. I'll come back over here and say entry fee. Get the alignment right. And that can be smaller. We'll also default that value to 0. Next, we need to have a drop down. Move that up a little bit. We need to have a drop down with a label. So let's grab these two. I'll copy and I'll paste. I'll put it above. I'll line it up like so. And this, we're going to say add team. I'm sorry, select team. the add team label go next to this label here. So this is the select team label. And the select team dropdown. We'll make this dropdown a little larger, about the same size as that text box. It's probably good. Now the next item, the create new team, I debate a little bit on how that should look. And we can definitely discuss this in the comments if you'd like below. But this create new team link, I decided to make into a link label, which by default is this blue color, which I thought about changing to maybe one of our accent colors. But the problem I have with that is if I change it to an accent color, and I have a green accent color I could use, which would stand out, the problem is that we've really been trained with the web that a blue text that's underlined is a link. And it's very obvious you click on a link to go somewhere. We kind of know that. And so to change that coloring to something that would be maybe more in line with our color scheme really would actually have a jarring effect in some ways. So there's a debate there. You can have it. I'm not a designer. I'm not really great at making things look wonderful. So you can kind of figure out on your own if you want to do that or not. I'm going to leave it as is. Now let's say create new. I kind of pull that over so it's actually over the dropdown. And these don't look quite right. There we go. Looks a little better. So now we have the tournament name, the entry fee, and then selecting a team from a dropdown or creating a new team. And then we have a button. This is add team. So I'm going to copy that button. I'll paste it in. And I might actually play around with making it wider but flatter. And we'll call this add team. Add team button. And that looks pretty good. So I'll copy that and paste it. And then down below, I'll line it up. And this will be the create prize button. And the text will say create prize. Now over here, it's a little bigger. We have a list box. I'll copy that and paste it over. Really a need to probably since it's just a list box, but it doesn't really hurt. But I will change this name to call it Tournament Players List Box. And then I will put a label above it. And call it Tournament Players Label. And let's actually shrink this up just a bit. You can count the number of rows if you want by how it clicks in. So that's 1 row, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could probably leave it at 5. So team/players. And the other thing you want to do is you want to know, let's pull this over a little more. We don't need to waste space if we don't have to. There is something I said for having some white space and some kind of breathing room in your form. But at the same time, you don't make it so open and empty that it's hard to see on a screen. It has to be huge in order to be visible. So there's that balance you have to reach. All right, so let's grab, I'm actually going to grab this button over here. I like its height a little better. Paste it over here. And I will put it right here for now. I'm debating if I put it here or if I put it up here. But let's leave it here for now, or maybe I'll even center it a little bit. Just trying to align over there with that bottom. I'm not sure that's right or not. I don't think it is. I'm actually going to select it and hit the down arrow. Kind of make it a little more in line. I could, again, align the middles of these two if I wanted to. In fact, let's see if we can do that. Let me hit this Align Middles button right here. And I kind of move this down a little bit, which actually means I need to realign this and then move all of these up to align again with that over there. So it's a whole lot of moving around for just that little bit of twitch, but that's okay. Some people will notice that and be off-put if it's not quite right. It's not me, but that's okay. I'm going to copy this and paste it and line it all up. And I'm going to call this Prizes Label, Prizes Listbox, and we'll call this Delete Selected Prize button. You can make these long if you want. The names really should be a little bit descriptive of what they do. I would recommend against abbreviations. Abbreviations are more confusing than they're really worth. We'll say delete selected. And actually move us down a little bit. And that throws the whole thing off, and that's okay, I guess. We should do the same thing here. Delete selected. We call this the delete selected prize button. So we'll call this the delete selected players button. Actually, selected player button. And then we'll make this a little bigger. We'll actually match these up. And it looks like about the same. So now let's make them kind of line up with where I should go, and I think we're good. Looks about right. So now we have the delete buttons, we have our list boxes, we have our labels. The only thing left is a button down here that says, let's give it a name first, the Create Tournament button. And we'll just say Create Tournament. Make it a little bigger, stand out a little more. And there we go. And that is form number 2. Let's move on to form number 3. So we're going to add Windows form, and we'll call this the Create Team form. And again, we'll go to our properties, say Create Team. We will change the icon. We'll change the font. And we will change the back color. There we go. Again, we're going to copy and paste from our previous forms. So we're actually going to copy this header label and this first text box and label right here. So I'll put them up there. I'll call this the create team. And this we will say team name, team name label, and the team name value. And then we will do actually a drop down. So let's grab this right here, and actually the button as well. I'll copy those and paste them, line up the labels, and we'll say select team member label and the select team member drop down and the add member button. Add member. Select team member. And down below, we actually had this box around a set of controls. So let's build that. The way I do that is through a group box. Now that's not in the common controls, but if you type for group box, it's either in containers or all Windows forms. So let's drag this on. Now what this does is it puts a visual boundary around our stuff, whatever it is we have on here. Now, there are more benefits than what I'm using it for. I'm basically just using it for a good delineation to say, hey, here's a group of stuff that all goes together that's not really connected with the rest of the form directly. It's kind of like a subform almost. So that's all I'm using it for, but there are more uses. You can move the whole group around very easily, and it even has its own label and so on and so forth. But for now, I'm just going to say this is the add new member box. Now right now that's our standard font with a standard font color. I am going to change that, but I'm not going to change it until after I put my stuff in here. Now since I'm copying and pasting, it's not as big a deal, but if I were dragging new stuff in here, it would be kind of a big deal. And the reason why is because anything dragged into here will inherit this item's properties. So I'm not going to change the font size or color until after I've brought everything in. So let's bring in, we have this right here. Let's grab this, Control C, Control V. And I'm going to say first name label and first name value. I will make this a little bigger once I figure out how large this is going to be. First name. That's going to be pretty big, so we'll move this over. Actually, make this box a little bigger. I was kind of hoping to keep this small, but I'm thinking this will have to do. We can always go left or right a little more easily on a monitor because typically monitors are in widescreen format. Not all the time, but most of the time anymore, they're widescreen. And so you have more horizontal space than you do vertical space. And so that's just something to keep in mind when you're designing your form. Which way do I want to kind of lean or bend? In this case, I want to kind of make it a little wider instead of making it longer by stacking these on top of each other. I'll copy and I'll paste this. I will say last name. And up here I will say last name label and last name text value. I want to say text because that's one of the ways I sometimes do it, but it really is just a value. And I'm going to paste this again. Let's go ahead and align these and then do another one right away. Now here's the danger in doing two at once. I could easily forget to rename one of these items. And I'll have a label 1 or a label 2 or a text box 1 or text box 2 floating out there. That's not ideal. I really, really don't like to see that. So just be careful when you're copying and pasting. Don't do too much without making sure you go back and rename right away. So I'll call this email label and email value and cell phone label and cell phone value. All right, there we go. And now down here I can say email and cell phone. I can say cell phone number if I wanted to, depending how long that is. That's a little long. Everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say cell phone. I could probably put just cell there or cell number, but cell phone's a little more professional, it seems like. So let's do that. I'll make that a little larger. I'll Control C and V on this button. And maybe make it a little smaller. Not too much though. I'll say create member. There we go. And now I'll come back to this, change my font size to the label size, and then the color I will change to my 51153-255. There we go. And now I can actually click and drag and bring this up if I want. So I might want to do a little bit of. And then I can actually, if I select one and control and select the other, it selects both for me, and they don't have to be next to each other. Because if I do this, I'm actually selecting the labels too. I don't want that. I just want the items, and so I select one and then hold down control and select the other, let go of control, and now I can drag and move these around as I want. So there we go. So now they're a little larger to match my box down below. And I can even move the add member over a little bit to better center it. And I can also bring all of this up just a smidge to better align with the create team. And now I need a list box on the right, which I can just copy from here and paste over here. Align it like that so. And then I'll actually make it the same height roughly as this box over here, which in order to make the same height, I'll actually drag it down a little bit and then move my button down. In which case I have a little more space to make my button the same width. So there we go. So now I have the tournament player list box. I'll actually call that the team members list box. So I have a team members list box, which we're going to select team members or add them. Either way, they're going to be added to this box over here. We'll also need a delete button for this. So let's go ahead and grab one of those. Copy, and I'll come over here. I'll stretch my form out, and I will paste that in, and I will roughly center it there. And I will say delete selected member. And then finally we have this button at the bottom, which I'll probably have to scroll just a bit for. And I will say, instead of create tournament, I will say create team. we go. And there is the Create Team form. Now, right now I'm scrolling a little bit, but that's mostly because it's kind of shrunk down into the Visual Studio IDE. And so I can probably, that'll be fine on the page itself, as long as you don't have a small monitor. And that is the assumption here, that the monitor is smaller. But that's a pretty safe assumption these days. So let's move right along to form number 4. Right click on our project, say Add, Windows Form. And this is the Create Prize form. The first thing we need to do is go to our properties. We're going to change that to say Create Prize. We'll change the icon to be our icon that we're using. We will change the forecolor. I'm sorry, not the forecolor. We'll change the back color. Let's change the correct color here. Change the back color to white. We'll change the font. .16 point. And now we can create the Create Prize form. This one's pretty simple. We'll just grab this and we will grab, well, let's do this for now. We'll paste this in. It's still called header label, which is good, but we need to change this to say Create Prize. And now we need to grab, let's grab actually this one right here. We'll paste and put it right here. Make sure it's aligned. There we go. We'll say that this is place number, label, and this is the place number value. We'll move this over. Now what we need to do is copy this and paste it 3 more times. Those don't look like they're in line. So here we can do. We can come over here and say make vertical spacing equal. And that makes a mess of things. So we hit undo. We select only one of the items. So let's just do the text boxes here and say make vertical spacing equal. Move that one down. And then we'll also say align lefts. Move that one over. And so now we can say, let's move this one right here. And then again, just start aligning all of these based off the first one. That last one does not want to line up. There we go. And then actually we're going to move this one down. So move it straight down to about here. So this is going to be the place name label and the place name value. And this is going to be the prize amount label and the prize amount value. And or this is going to be the prize percentage label and the prize percentage value. Let's go back and change all this text. So that's the place name, the prize amount, and this is the prize percentage. Next, we have to add one more label. So let's just copy this and paste it. That's actually about right. And we'll do the dash or dash like so. And we'll move this around until it's about what we like. And we'll just call this the or label, just to give it a better name. And then finally come over here, grab our create team button and paste this in, put it about the center, call it the create prize button, and say create prize. Looks a little big for this form. Well, you can address that if you want to, but I think that looks okay. And it keeps the same approximate size as all the rest of the create buttons, the big ones. So that leads us to conclude form number 4. We only have one more to go. So let's right click on Tracker UI, say add Windows form, and say tournament dashboard form. We'll go to our properties. By now you should be kind of familiar with this. We say tournament dashboard. Let's see if I can get it all right. Tournament dashboard. We change the font. We change the, that's the icon. We change the font. I'm getting ahead of myself. I have no clue how to pronounce that. Is it Sego UI? CGO? I don't know. Whatever it is, it's a cool looking font. And it's 16 point. That's what we want. And then finally, we want to change the back color to be white. That's our form. We'll actually make it a little bit smaller when we're done, but we can start with that. So let's grab the header. And this is going to say, and I actually centered this, so let's first change the text to say tournament dashboard. And so we can actually center that if you want. If we want to center that, we just say format, center and form horizontally. That moves it over to center. And then we can say we want to drop down, and so we need to come over here, grab this, we'll copy it, we'll paste it. And if we're going to keep our centering format, we'll do that. So we can center all of these like so. And we can say for this, it is the load existing tournament label. And this is the load existing tournament dropdown. And we'll have a button below that, but first let's change this text. It says load existing tournament. Okay, we'll center these in a minute. I centered them once, and it's every time you change things have to be redone. So let's just wait till the end. Now I need a button over here. So I'll take this and paste it in. I'll put it down below here. I'll say load tournament. Load tournament button. And then we have to have that big one. At least that's the design we chose. which is create tournament button. All right, we can kind of move this form around. We can select all of these. I need less space here. Let's drag this down. Move this all up. We can say make vertical spacing equal. That's not really what we want, but instead you want to align the centers. And then shrink that down and maybe even move it up a little more. And then adjust our form accordingly. So there we go. Now we have our last form. This form is going to either select one of the existing tournaments and then load it, or create a new one. Now, the one thing I didn't really point out beforehand, but that I want to go back and talk about, is this idea of, you're copying and pasting and creating all these different items. It's very easy to forget to rename one of them. But if you come over here to the properties, and if you do this drop down here, now notice how many things are in here. That's pretty impressive for this little form. But look at all the different names. If you see, group box 1, select it, it selects that group box, and now you can actually rename this to be something more intelligent. Let's say add new member or group box. So that's a great way to make sure that you haven't missed anything in the naming by just looking through here and making sure there's no 1s or 2s or anything that you don't expect to be there. Again, we can come here and very easily go from form to form and make sure that they're all the way they should be. Once we're done, we save them. And actually, the one that we need to change is this form is actually the first form that starts when the project loads. So let's go back to our Solution Explorer. And let's kind of collapse all these forms down and go to program.cs. And where it says new tournament viewer form, we want to say new tournament dashboard form. So now if we run this, I'll bring it over here. This is what starts up. And this is the starting point for our application. Now, in case you're not sure why I did that or how that works, if you're familiar with the console application, we know we have a static void main, and that's where all of our code runs. And once static void main is done, the console closes. Well, a Windows form is basically the same kind of design in the fact that we have a static void main. And that's actually inside of program.cs. That's right here. And once this method is done, the application closes. And so we have these 3 lines of code. The most important one for us, since these are basically saying just do what Microsoft's already set up. But this last one here says application.run new tournament dashboard form, which creates a new instance of a tournament dashboard form. But what that does is it actually pauses the application right here. At least it pauses this thread or this method, and it says don't end this line until this instance right here closes. Which is why when we start this up, we're running this form right here. If we ever close this form, the application closes, even if we have other forms open. So that's just a quick tip. You probably already knew that, but I wanted to point that out just to make sure. Also note this right here, XML code comments, something that Microsoft did, not us. But it's just one more indication that yes, you should be using XML code comments. And in fact, when we come back through all of these projects, these forms, and view their code, we'll actually add our own XML comments to all of our methods that really need it. Anything that's being called outside of that form. So that's it. That is our form design project. That's really all there is to it. It went really quick in some ways, and in some ways it took a little long. But mostly the reason it took so long is because we actually talked through why we do things and how we do things and those kind of things. But the actual form creation process, once we got through the first couple and we covered all those topics, went really quickly, especially when we're copying and pasting. That made life a little easier for us. Now, coming up next, we're going to start getting into building our logic. We're going to take our project, our solution as it stands right now, and start wiring things up. And that's where, the intimidation kind of kicks in for some people. The idea of, even if I believe you, Tim, and I created my class library and I created my forms and things look great, I'm just stuck now. And you know what? We're going to get unstuck pretty quick, because we'll find we have a lot of work we can do before we even really get into the hard stuff. And the more we chip away piece by piece, we'll find that there isn't a whole lot of hard stuff. It's mostly just easy stuff. And it's just kind of those Lego pieces being put together in different ways. So that's what's coming up in the next lesson, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Before you go, you'll see a link on the left to buy this course. Check out the intro video on this playlist for more information about what you get if you pay. Also, if you are ever wondering what you could do to help this channel out without paying money, I've listed 6 things that really help. I'd appreciate if you consider doing one or more of these. Thanks again, and don't forget to keep practicing what you learned.